All right, so now we're on the next step. We're going to talk about the Pathfinder tool, which is incredibly useful. But before we do that, I want to review one more time the pen tool. Now you might say, Miss G, we just learned about the pen tool. We just practiced the pen tool. I'm telling you, the pen tool is one of the fundamental tools you'll be using in Illustrator. So I'm going to take what I just did, and I'm just going to scale it and move it over here. And I'm going to work again. Now remember, I'm like, I can't select this. It's because it's locked, right? And so it's really important to know where you are, which is highlighted, right? And to know where you need to go. So just like in life, you need to know where you are, know where you came from, and know where you need to go. And this is where the layer tool will tell you that. And remember, it's like pieces of paper, one on top of the other. And you might say, oh, Miss G, I want this apple to be on top of here, and I said arrange, bring to front. It won't get on top. That's because it's not just where it is in the sublayer, it's also where it is in its main layers. So if this main layer right here that this is a sublayer of is above this other layer where this apple is, then it's always going to be on top no matter what you do. And that's important to know. So when you're within the sublayers, you can take objects and you can say, oh, I want this object that's right here. I want it to be in front. If you right click on it, you can arrange, bring to front. And there's also a lot of other tools here that are useful. But this doesn't help you if you want it to be in front of this apple. If this apple right here, you can see it's on a layer that's above the layer that this one is on. This is a sublayer of a layer that's below it. So like pieces of paper, one on top of the other. This is on a piece of paper that's below this top piece of paper. So it doesn't matter that you did arrange, bring to front. You need to actually take this layer and either move it to the top of this layer and like drag it onto the top of this layer, or move this whole entire layer. This is why creating multiple layers for your sublayers is important, all right? So that's a little piece of advice for you. So I want to make sure this is locked, and I'm gonna show you one more time the pen tool. So you can draw curves, straight lines, closed paths, open paths, right? Remember, we're gonna use the pen tool shortcut P, all right? And we're gonna set our first anchor point. Make sure if you're like this, you're like, I can't do anything, Miss G. You're on a locked layer. You need to be on a layer that's not locked. And this also, you can hide everything else. So this is important. It's like Photoshop in that way, where you can hide and you can lock things. So make sure you're on a layer that's not locked and you got the pen tool selected. Now, when you first set your anchor point, you can actually set your first anchor point as a curve. And then you could actually create an S curve. And that's something that's actually quite useful. And I'm just going to delete it and go back to the beginning. To create a 90-degree angle, I can click and then hold shift, and this lets me create 90-degree angles. So these modifier tools are very helpful. The shifts and the alts, these can help you with many different tools that you're using. So remember, we're going to draw simple curves. So we want less points to show our object than more points. It creates a smoother looking final product, and it's also easier then to go in and manipulate those points. So we select our anchor point, all right? And keep in mind that if you are holding, it's opposite. So whatever you're dragging, it's opposite. So when I'm clicking and dragging, it's going in the opposite direction. All right. So if I was going to do the S curve, I would hold and click, and then I want to go to the other one, and I want to click and hold in the opposite direction. So it's you're pulling your line. So if I click and then I pull, I'm pulling it in the opposite direction, right? So you can kind of see that. So click and pull, think opposite direction, all right? Reset your point. If you don't want this curve to continue, reset by going back to the anchor point. You can now draw a straight line, or you can create a different kind of curve. So draw and pull opposite direction, reset, reset. Now, if you do it like this, I can't see what's going underneath. Make sure you're using the stroke so that you can actually see what you're doing. All right, so that is, again, the pen tool. Remember, the direct selection tool is your friend. It allows you to change what you're doing, change your points, change where they're located. The actual selection tool lets you move the whole entire object. The direct selection tool gets you to directly select your anchor points and the handles for your curves. These are your friends: adding points, removing points, and converting. So you're like, all right, Miss G, I got this. I know paths. I'm ready to start doing more interesting things. Now, if you go to Window, you'll see there's tons of options here. What I want you to do is open up the Pathfinder window and take this whole entire baby and just dock it all up here. And you can kind of see, I don't really want that dock there. You can move things around and you can dock them as you wish, or they can be freestanding. Here is the Pathfinder tool, and this is an incredibly important tool. It allows you to combine and sort of manipulate your shapes. And remember, your shapes can be whether the things that you drew with your pen tool or the things that you did with the shape tool. So if I did this little doodah right here and I made him yellow, and then I did a little pen tool and I did this guy here, and I made him brown. So I kind of got my thing going on. And now I'm going to play around with the Pathfinder tool. So you'll notice there's 2 rows, shape modes and pathfinders. And there's a lot of options. I'm going to tell you straight up, I don't usually use a lot of these. I mainly use Unite and the minus front. That's usually what I use, but I want to show them all to you. So if I have a bunch of objects, like I have 2 objects, the shape and the pathfinders, they allow you to manipulate the 2. So we have Unite, which combines all the objects. So remember, they need to be actually selected. So if I do Unite, it combines it, and then it changes the color to the whatever was in the front. So I'm just going to undo that. The next one we have up is the Expand tool, and this subtracts all selected shapes from the backmost shape. Oh, so you can see that whatever is in the front gets selected from the backmost shape. So if I have another object, for example, let's make another object right here, and then very importantly, I'm selecting all these objects, and then I go like this, it subtracts it from that other object, right? And this one is the minus front, and it's quite helpful. So the next one we have is the intersect, and if I select these 2 objects, the intersect tool will subtract everything that does not overlap. And so you can see here, this is the point that doesn't overlap, and that's what that one does. Excludes subtracts everything that does overlap. So it's just now subtracting the thing that does overlap. Next up, we have divide. Divide divides up everything. So if we go divide, you can now see it's all grouped together. But if I ungroup it, it's now divided into different pieces. Now, you might say, hey, Miss G, what's grouping and ungrouping? So grouping kind of is taking all those objects and making them into one movable shape. And if I right click and then group, it's now I can move it together without having to worry about selecting them individually, right? And to edit one of those individually, I just double click and I can go into isolation mode. When you're doing some of these Pathfinder, it automatically groups it. So just make sure you right click and go ungroup. So then they become editable objects. So that one's quite handy. The divide tool is one I use quite often as well. Then we have trim, which removes any overlapping piece or shape. So you can see I have these 2 right here. And I'm going to go trim. And I remember ungroup. And you can see, oh, it trims out that part right there. And some of these do sort of similar things, yeah? And it's important to play around with them so you can really see what they do. Next is crop. So if I take this one, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to go over to crop. Crop uses the top object to crop everything else out. So then all we have is this. Now, I don't use that one a lot. The next one I'm going to show you is the merge, which is the same as the trim, plus it merges the overlapping shapes of the same color. And remember, you ungroup. And I don't really use that one too terribly much. The next one is outline, which is like divide, but separates individual line segments instead of shapes. And I can safely say I don't ever use that one. So it makes them into individual line segments instead of shapes. And I don't really ever use that one. And the next one is minus back. So select these two, minus back. Minus back removes anything overlapping or behind the top object. So those are a bunch of them. And you might say, Miss G, well, you know, these aren't necessarily so handy. They are when you start doing more sophisticated things. So for example, if I created this, what will be an eyeball. So this is the white part of the eye, and say I wanted a perfect circle for the eye. And I want to actually get rid of the rest of this in an easy way. This is where the Pathfinder tool comes in handy. This where I might say divide and then ungroup and then delete the overlapping parts. So there's a lot of different options. It comes into handy. So this is the time when I want you to then be playing around with your Pathfinder tool.